And let's jump into the first story. It is but a tweet from Glenn Greenwald, who says, Ukraine has biological research facilities, says Undersecretary of State Victoria Nuland, when asked by Senator Rubio if Ukraine has biological or chemical weapons, and says she's worried Russia may get them. But she says she's 100% sure that if there's a biological attack, it's Russia. And actually, Marco Rubio intervened in her answer to answer for her. And it is one of the most disgusting things. Marco Rubio, man, talk about a bad person. But let me play for you this clip because this is truly revealing.
Well, I only have a minute left. Let me ask you, does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
I'm sure you're aware that the Russian propaganda groups are already putting out there all kinds of information about how they've uncovered a plot by the Ukrainians to release biological weapons in the country and with NATO's coordination. If there's a biological or chemical weapon incident or attack inside of Ukraine, is there any doubt in your mind that 100% it would be the Russians that would be behind it?
There is no doubt in my mind, Senator, and it is classic Russian technique to blame on the other guy what they're planning to do themselves.
Wow. If there was anything that could remove all confidence I had in what Victoria Nuland was saying, it's Marco Rubio teeing up the answer to her. Of course, if there is an attack, it's Russia, right? You agree it's Russia? Yes. Okay, then. Just let her answer the questions. But I digress. Here we have Undersecretary of State saying, well, there's biolabs in Ukraine and we're concerned Russia could get them. Now, let's just put aside anything outside of this because there were conspiracies. I don't mind anything outside of that. Let me just say, is it a serious concern for us in the United States that Ukraine has biolabs? What are they researching? I don't know. What if Russia gets a hold of them? Is there something there that we should be concerned about? Is this maybe why Vladimir Putin says I'm going into Ukraine? Because that was what a lot of people were saying. Now, that's not a conspiracy theory. If you are speculating that the motive of Vladimir Putin was to gain access to research facilities, I'd say that's war. Like if you have a military base and another country invades to gain control of that base, I'd be like, okay. So is that maybe what we're looking at?
Well, I just want to mention something about Secretary of State Nuland here. She's a very interesting figure. So one thing that she mentioned in 2013 is that the United States government had spent over $5 billion trying to promote democracy in Ukraine. And there was a leaked phone call between her and America's ambassador to Europe where she was discussing who she thought would be a good leader for Ukraine. And wouldn't you know, it just happens by coincidence, a couple weeks later, that person becomes prime minister.
Huh.
And yeah. And so we talk about how Russia spending and not even Russia, non-state actors in Russia spending $46,000 on Facebook ads was a quote-unquote act of war. And the United States government has thrown literal billions of dollars at Ukraine to influence their leadership. This woman was on the phone, on record, saying there was a specific person she wanted in charge of government there. That person ends up in that position weeks later. And I'm supposed to trust this person, that they have the best interest of that nation in mind, and that she's going to tell me about Russia's nefarious deeds.
The CIA just overthrew. I mean, they were part of a coup of
in
when they put in Poroshenko. And yeah, I mean, that's just on the table now.
How do you know?
2014. Everything I look at says there's overwhelming evidence the United States, now that we've accepted that the CIA has been involved with the overthrow, and I'm like, is there evidence that says that
we need that? That's not officially
so it's not. Every time I ask it, they're like, "Yeah, it's totally confirmed."
To who?
Well, I thought you on the show like last week. We talked about
it was heavily speculated. First of all, there were major protests in Ukraine. It is widely speculated, believed the West was well. First of all, it's a fact. The West was very much supporting the Euromaidan protests. That doesn't mean the U.S. made Yanukovych flee. There's a big difference between the CIA actually having agents and assets going in and doing these things. Now, that being said, I would not be surprised in any sense that the CIA did this. I want to be very, very careful and precise because
I
we're dealing
what
with
I'm saying then.
Because we're dealing with The fact that the undersecretary just said there are biolabs. Okay, let's start from there. Is Russia pissed about that? Very well, maybe. Now we have this story from USA Today. This is why getting the fact perfect is important. They say, fact check. False claim of U.S. biolabs in Ukraine tied to Russian disinformation campaign. So right there, you have interesting points. U.S. biolabs. Okay, well, they're Ukrainian, according to Victoria Nuland. She said Ukraine has biolabs. So you see how they do this. They slap U.S. biolabs in front of biolabs, and all of a sudden the whole story's fake.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. They fact check a different story than the one that's actually being discussed, and then anytime the story comes up, they get to slap false on it.
So here's what they say. The claim: there are biolabs in Ukraine funded by the U.S. government. Now, I will say we read on this show a U.S. government site talking about U.S. funded research in biolabs in Ukraine. So I don't know what that was all about. They say in the early morning hours, Putin launched a full-scale military, blah, blah, blah. Similar posts claimed Russia destroyed 7 of the 11 supposed labs in missile strikes. The claims are wrong. Independent fact-checking outlets reported. I actually don't think those claims are true, to be honest, because we looked at the map of missile strikes and the map of labs, and they don't line up. It's weird that people would make that claim when all you need to do is say Putin's mad about labs.
He's probably blowing up stuff near the labs so that he can take the labs.
I would assume Russia wants the biolabs, as Nuland actually said in front of Marco Rubio.
Regarding of
Russia would seize them.
If it's war or not, I think historically you see border skirmishes that aren't considered war. Like if an enemy is setting up artillery on the border, on the other side of the border from your country, you may send in a party to destroy the artillery and then come back. And it's not really an act of war. It's more of just like, or sometimes they go in and they'd steal food from like the enemy, but it wasn't really war.
You ready for this part of the same article?
Oh, yeah.
The same article says the Ukrainian and U.S. governments partnered in August 2005 to prevent the proliferation of dangerous pathogens and related expertise and to minimize potential biological threats, according to the treaty. Interfax Ukraine reported in May 2020 that part of the agreement was aimed at modernizing state laboratories in the Odessa, Kharkiv, Lviv, Kiev, Vinnytsia, Kherson, and Dnipropetrovsk regions.
Whoa.
I'm trying. Those efforts included making repairs, updating equipment, and purchasing supplies. The Security Service of Ukraine said the laboratories, financed from the state budget, are subordinate to the Ministry of Health and the State Services on Food Safety and Consumer Protection, according to Interfax Ukraine. The U.S. Embassy in Ukraine sought to set the record straight on these biolabs claim in April 2020, calling the theories disinformation spreading in some circles in Ukraine that mirrors Russian disinformation regarding the strong U.S.-Ukrainian partnership to reduce biological threats. It sure sounds like they're trying really hard to claim that although the U.S. did partner and help Ukraine with a lot of the work they were doing in certain biological areas, these are not U.S. biolabs. Yeah, no, that's true. They're not. They're Ukrainian, but is the U.S. involved? I'd sure like to know.
Well, usually they hire a company like EcoHealth Alliance to get involved for them so that they can wipe their hands of it.
Well, yeah, what's with our country and like funding all of this insane biological research around the globe, as you know, we saw with the Wuhan lab too. And I think, you know, this goes back to, the way this war has been presented to us in the media is that, you know, Ukraine is the good guys who can do no wrong, and we have to take the government of Ukraine's word over anything else. And as we've seen, we've been fed so many lies as this war has happened, between, you know, imminent nuclear meltdown that turned out to be false, as Zelensky was calling for a no-fly zone. And I think it just goes back, when you're in a war, propaganda is very important, and propaganda to help your side win is very important. And a lot of that is just being fed to us by our media.
I want to read the last portion of this article. They say, because this is interesting. Based on our research, we rate false the claim that there are U.S. biolabs in Ukraine funded by the U.S. government. The posts misrepresent a treaty between the United States and Ukraine aimed at preventing biological threats. The labs are owned and funded by the Ukrainian government. The Security Service of Ukraine and the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine have said the claim is false. Reports indicate the claim is tied to a years-long Russian disinformation campaign aimed at discrediting the U.S. Okay, fair. I totally accept all of that. Okay, so Ukraine does have biolabs.
Right.
So when the narrative came out that Russia was concerned about biolabs in Ukraine, that was legitimate?
Yep.
Like, is Russia really concerned about that? All right. Sorry, everybody, you know, that they're spreading this disinformation. How about we just talk about the truth, that there are biological research facilities in Ukraine and that Russia wants to seize them.
Well, because
or the U.S. fears Russia will.
Yeah, well, like I said on our last episode, the only time you need to really come in with these fact checks is if there's some kernel of truth that you don't want people discussing. That seems to be the case very often. Maybe I'm being a little hyperbolic, but we see it frequently. And I will say this, after the last 5 or 6 years, it is absolutely laughable that they think they would have any credibility talking about biological laboratories, bioweapons labs, and where they're getting their funding, and B, Russian disinformation. It doesn't exactly bolster my confidence in the veracity of their claims that they're using that phrase.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.